Chapter 13. Harold froze. Left. Left for where? Dylan answered, she's joining a classified aerospace research project. She left this morning. Harold stood there, stunned. Charina had left for a business trip just to avoid the wedding. A flicker of irritation rose in him. Charina's temper was getting out of hand. When is she coming back? He asked immediately. Dylan knew Harold, and was well aware that he was Charina's fiancé. That was why Harold's question left him even more puzzled. Didn't Charina tell you? She's part of a top-secret research project. There's no set timeline. At the very least, she won't be back for another 10 years. 10 years. Harold's face went completely pale. Meanwhile, at Nebula Aerospace Base, a private helicopter touched down. As Charina stepped off, a woman was already waiting for her. Nice to meet you. I'm Melanie Clark. I'll be your mentor here. Melanie led Charina to the dorms, giving her a rundown of the cafeteria, work schedules, and general base rules. Then, she said, I heard you're the heiress to the Moran family. Life here is pretty bare bones. Are you sure you can handle it? Charina smiled. I don't mind. A simple life is fine. I came here for work anyway. At that, Melanie chuckled and extended a hand. Welcome to Project Ether. Charina shook her hand firmly. Thank you. The dream that was shattered in her past life could finally be continued in this one. Harold had no idea how he made it back to the Santiago residence. By the time he walked through the door, still in a daze, Ella rushed up to him. So, did you find Charina? Her voice snapped him back to reality. She left for an aerospace research base. A research base. Ella blinked. You mean like a work trip? How long? Harold's hands clenched into fists. At least 10 years. Maybe, forever. Each word felt like it drained the air from his lungs. Forever. Ella's face paled. Then, as if something clicked, she muttered, so that's why. Harold's gaze sharpened. Why what? I heard she signed a bunch of long-term contracts with her managers and even put some of her assets into a trust. I assumed she was just preparing for marriage, but it turns out she was planning to leave all along. A realization hit Harold like a slap. His tone was laced with frustration as he scolded, and you didn't think to tell me sooner. Ella immediately snapped back. I should be the one questioning you. Why did she leave so suddenly? She used to love you, yet overnight, she broke off the engagement and disappeared to the other side of the world. What did you do to her? Harold's first instinct was to deny it, but the words caught in his throat. Then, like floodgates bursting open, memories rushed in. After they slept together that night, he had agreed to marry Charina, but he had treated her with scorn. Then, he had seized Livia's final masterpiece for Hazel, only for Hazel to accidentally shatter it. Later, when Hazel was drugged, he had immediately assumed it was Charina's doing. He had even drugged her in return, thinking he was merely giving her a taste of her own medicine. And just days ago, he had left Charina behind in that fire. Now, with Ella demanding answers, he realized that just in the past few days alone, he had hurt Charina so many times. Not to mention the years of neglect. Suddenly, he turned on his heel. Ella asked, where are you going? Harold's face was grim as he replied, I'm bringing her back. Chapter 14. Harold returned to the college, found Dylan, and got straight to the point. Mr. Hoden, please give me the contact information for Charina's research institute. I need to bring her back. Dylan was stunned by his words. Young man, are you out of your mind? That project is a top-level national initiative, not some casual job. Every researcher was meticulously selected. Once they're in, they can't just walk away. Harold, usually composed, felt a surge of irritation. His tone sharpened. Mr. Hoden, you don't understand. Charina didn't actually want to join the institute. She only left because we had an argument 2 days ago. She left just to spite me. That had to be it. Even now, Harold was convinced that Charina had acted out of anger because of what happened in the past few days. He continued, she's going to regret it in a few days. If she stays, it'll only disrupt the project. It's better if I bring her back now. Dylan frowned. What are you talking about? Charina didn't decide to join this project 2 days ago. Harold froze. As he walked out of the college, his mind remained in a haze. Dylan's words echoed in his ears. Charina called us last week, saying she wanted to join. She was firm about it. We even double-checked multiple times, and she never wavered. This wasn't some impulsive decision. Harold froze in his tracks. Last week, the same time he had proposed marriage. That was when Charina had first mentioned canceling the engagement. At the time, he'd thought she was just being dramatic. But she had been serious. As she called off their engagement, she had already secured a spot in the research project and made plans to leave. But why? Back then, the auction hadn't happened yet. Neither the drugging incident nor the fire had taken place. What had made Charina so determined to leave? Harold couldn't figure it out. Still lost in thought, he arrived home, only to find Matthew sitting in the living room, looking pleased. "Harry, you're back. I have good news. We can finally schedule the wedding." Quote. Chapter 15. Harold froze for a moment, then grew excited. "You found Charina," but Matthew shook his head. "Of course not. I already asked around. Charina's project is a top-level classified initiative. She's completely cut off from the outside world. No one can reach her." Harold's hands dropped to his sides in defeat. Matthew, however, remained pleased. "But it doesn't matter if we can't find Charina. I found her cousin, Hazel Moran. She's also a Moran, so she can marry you in Charina's place. That way, the alliance with the Moran remains intact. I've already spoken to her, and she agreed. This way, we won't become a laughingstock in Dornwich." "No." Harold's expression darkened. "I was engaged to Charina. How can you just replace her? Aren't you worried that when she finds out, she'll get angry and cut ties with our family?" "What nonsense are you talking about?" Mather frowned. "Charina left for a long-term project. She clearly wanted to break off the engagement. She's completely given up on you. Why would she care who you marry now? Not only that, but she won't be back for at least a decade. She already entrusted her company to her managers. She's not going to suddenly interfere. Anyway, all the concerns you mentioned at the wedding no longer exist. The only thing we need to avoid is making it look like we were the ones who backed out. The best way to do that is to marry another Moran. That way, everyone will see our family is honorable and committed to our word. Everything is settled, Harry. What are you still worried about?" Harold clenched his fists. His expression stiffened. Logically, he knew Matthew was right. Everything was right. Everything was resolved. All he had to do was marry Haley. He had never loved Charina. Whether he married her or Haley, it made no difference. Then, why did he feel such a deep resistance to the idea? Why did his chest ache, as if something had been ripped out of him? "I can't marry Haley." He couldn't make sense of his feelings. All he could do was repeat the words mechanically, "I just can't." Matthew was about to lose his temper, but before he could erupt, Ella, who had been silent all this time, stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. She lifted her gaze to Harold. "Harry, at this point, it doesn't matter who you marry, Haley or even Hazel. We'll accept it, but I need to ask you something." She looked directly into his eyes. "Are you insisting on marrying Charina purely because of duty and business, or is it because you love her?" "Of course, it's because." Harold blurted out a response, but the words caught in his throat. Because if it were truly about duty and business, he should have already let go. Ella sighed softly, as if she had seen right through him. "Harry, Charina is gone. Are you still going to lie to yourself? Do you really not love her, or do you just not dare to admit that you do?" Harold had no idea how he left the Santiago residence. Ella's words echoed in his head. "Do you really not love her, or do you just not dare to admit that you do?" Harold clenched his fists tightly. No, there was no way he loved Charina. Ho loved Hazel. The moment that thought crossed his mind, he knew he had to find Hazel. Too many things had happened all at once. That had to be why he felt so unsettled. As soon as he saw Hazel, he'd remember whom he truly loved. With that thought, he asked Patrick and found out that Hazel was at a club with her friends. Without hesitation, he headed straight there. But just as he reached the door of the private room and was about to push the door open, he overheard Hazel's friend speaking. "Hazel, you swore up and down that you'd bag your Uncle Harry and marry into the Santiago family. So, did you pull it off or not?" Chapter 16. Just as Harold was about to push open the door, his hand froze midair. He looked up in disbelief through the glass panel on the door, taking in the scene inside. Inside, Hazel sat surrounded by her friends. Her heavily dolled-up face looked nothing like the sweet, innocent young lady he thought he knew. She was smug, radiating triumph. "Of course I pulled it off. Haven't you heard? That old hag, Charina, has already left for the aerospace research base. She won't be back for at least 10 or 20 years. The ladies around her erupted into applause. "Damn, Hazel, you're really something. You actually managed to break off an ironclad engagement and a massive business partnership between the Moran and Santiago families. Tell us your secret, Hazel. How did you get Charina to back out on her own? We need to take notes." Hazel smirked. "Oh, I did plenty. For starters, Uncle Harry agreed to the wedding in the first place because I drugged him. He was out of it, and that's how he ended up sleeping with Charina." Outside the door, Harold was stunned. That night with Charina, she had insisted they were both drunk. But Harold knew that being drunk didn't feel like that. So, he had assumed Charina drugged him to force him into the marriage. It turned out he was only half right. He had been drugged, but not by Charina. It was Hazel. But why would Hazel do that? Not only was Harold baffled, but even Charina's friends couldn't understand it. "Hazel, I don't get it. Weren't you basically forcing Harold to marry Charina? Why would you do that?" Hazel laughed, her eyes glinting with slyness. "You don't get it, do you? The Santiago and Moran family's partnership is set in stone. No matter what, Uncle Harry had to marry Charina. That was inevitable. Since that's the case, I might as well use this chance to make him believe Charina set him up and make him completely hate her." Harold couldn't believe his ears. Was that scheming woman inside really the same Hazel he had once believed to be sweet and innocent? Her friends were still cheering her on, hyping her up as she basked in their admiration. "That was just the beginning," Hazel continued. "Then, at the auction, I deliberately acted like I wanted Charina's mother's final work so Uncle Harry would spend a fortune to buy it. Once he did, I smashed it on purpose. Then, came Charina's birthday party. I drugged myself and made sure Uncle Harry and I ended up in bed together. The moment it happened, I knew he'd never be able to walk away from me." She let out a light-hearted giggle. "But that wasn't enough. I needed Uncle Harry to think it was Charina who drugged me. That way, he'd hate her even more. I have to admit, Charina caught me off guard that time. She actually injured herself just to make Uncle Harry believe her. I didn't see that coming. But, so what? I had an even bigger move planned. I set fire to Moran Manor. Just as I expected, Uncle Harry saved me instead of Charina. And just like that, she finally gave up on him." She laughed afterward. Outside the door, Harold stood frozen, every last trace of color draining from his face. He never imagined that everything that had happened recently had been orchestrated by Hazel. Inside the private room, Hazel was still basking in her triumph, laughing. "I did all that just to make Charina lose faith in Uncle Harry and walk away on her own. And guess what? It actually worked." She threw her head back, still laughing. "That idiot ran off with her tail between her legs. Now I'm the future Mrs. Santiago." She had her chin held high when the door suddenly burst open. Hazel's smug smile froze as she locked eyes with the man storming in, his face dark with fury. Her blood ran cold. Uncle Harry. Chapter 17. Hazel frantically tried to slip her mask of innocence back on, but it was too late. Harold strode forward and grabbed her throat. Screams erupted as Hazel's friends scattered in fear, fleeing the room. In the end, only the two of them remained. "Hazel," Harold forced the word through gritted teeth. "You've been lying to me for years, haven't you?" His mind reeled back to the first time he met her. Back when Hazel's father had just passed away, little Hazel asked him where her father had gone with red-rimmed eyes. Guilt and pity had made him vow to take care of her for the rest of his life. At first, it was just responsibility and sympathy. But as she grew older, she became different from the women in his world, the ones who carried designer bags, lived in luxury, and looked down on everyone else. Hazel, on the other hand, had always seemed so uncertain of her place, as if she thought she didn't deserve anything. That fragile, vulnerable side of her had made him protective. And that protection had made him think he loved her. But now, seeing her for who she truly was, he suddenly realized he was furious at being deceived. But he wasn't heartbroken. Why? If he truly loved Hazel, shouldn't this hurt? Yet, it was Charina who made his chest tighten in unbearable pain. It was her pale face when Hazel shattered Livia's final work. It was Charina, resisting the effects of the drug and driving those scissors into herself with chilling resolve. It was her calm expression as she stared at him through the flames, almost as if she had expected this all. Harold felt like he couldn't breathe. In the end, all his fury could only be redirected at Hazel standing before him. His grip tightened. At that moment, he really wanted to kill Hazel. Hazel saw the murder in his eyes, and real terror gripped her. She gasped and struggled, barely managing to choke out, "Uncle Harry, please, for my father's sake." Harold's eyes widened. A second later, he let go. Hazel collapsed onto the floor, clutching her throat and coughing violently. "Hazel," Harold said coldly, his voice devoid of the warmth and affection it once held. Now, it was as distant and frigid as if he were speaking to a stranger. "I've long since repaid everything I owed your father. From this moment on, you and I have nothing to do with each other." With that, he turned and walked away. Hazel sobbed his name, crying until her voice was hoarse. Yet he never looked back. Harold rushed home, only to find the living room cluttered with boxes. He frowned. "What's all this?" Ella replied calmly, "Charina sent some things over a while ago. I only just got around to sorting through them. Oh, and I found a bunch of your stuff in the basement. You might want to take a look." Harold's gaze fell on the scattered items, and then he froze. Chapter 18. Two piles of items sat before Harold. The first pile was what Charina had someone return to him. He glanced through them and realized they were all things he had given her before. Most of them were items he had casually told Patrick to buy, so he barely even remembered them. His expression darkened. Had Charina already planned to return everything before she left? His gaze shifted to the second pile. He recognized them as gifts Charina had given him in the past. Only now did he remember that Charina used to love giving him gifts. For his birthday, their anniversary, and on every little occasion, she always had something ready. He used to find it exhausting. Eventually, he stopped even opening them. Instead, he tossed them all into the basement without a second glance. And now, Ella had laid them all out in front of him. Harold sat there in a daze, slowly unwrapping the dust-covered gifts, one by one. There was the blessed charm she had gotten for him the year he took his college entrance exams. He recalled that the shrine was known for its miracles, but getting a charm required waiting in line overnight. There was the scarf she had knitted for his birthday last year. He remembered seeing her practicing. Her fingers were pricked from countless mistakes. It had taken her months to finish that scarf. And then, there was a stock transfer contract. Last month, he had casually mentioned wanting to acquire a gaming company but couldn't close the deal. Somehow, she had pulled it off. There were so many gifts, each one was filled with thought, effort, and love. And yet, Harold had never even opened them. A sharp, tearing pain ripped through his chest. What had he done? He had taken the heart of a woman like Charina and crushed it beneath his feet, all while treasuring a liar like Hazel. His hands trembled as his eyes landed on the final gift. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He remembered this one clearly. It was the last gift he had received from Charina, given to him just a few days ago. If she had truly wanted to leave him behind, then why had she still given him a gift? Clinging to that last shred of hope, he tore the box open. But when he saw what was inside, his mind went blank. So, what Charina had given him back then wasn't gift at all. It was the symbol of their engagement, returned to him. She was truly trying to sever all ties with him. The last thread holding him together snapped. He finally couldn't bear it any longer and collapsed. His vision went black. Harold was burning up. The doctor said his fever was brought on by emotional shock. He was unconscious for 3 days and nights without regaining awareness. During his coma, he kept mumbling names. Sometimes, it was Ella. Sometimes, it was Charina. Matthew and Ella were worried sick. Finally, on the 3rd day, Harold woke up. Ella rushed to his bedside. "Harry, you're finally awake. You've been out for 3 days. You scared me half to death." Only after she spoke did she suddenly realize that the expression on Harold's face was completely different from usual. It was as if he had become a completely different person. She was terrified. Her voice trembled uncontrollably. "Harry, what's wrong? You're scaring me." Harold snapped back to reality. His expression returned to the one Ella was familiar with. Yet, there was still a hint of complexity in his gaze. "Mom, I had a dream," he murmured softly. "In the dream, Charina married me, but I failed her." Chapter 19. Ella's eyes turned red when she heard Harold's words. "Oh, Harry, what's the point of all this?" She choked out. "Charina loved you so much, and you never cherished her. Now that she's gone, you think about her day and night. But no matter how many dreams you have, she's not coming back." Harold frowned. He knew that dream wasn't just some subconscious longing for Charina. It felt strange, like it had actually happened. In the dream, he and Charina had been engaged since childhood, just like in real life. But in that world, she never joined the aerospace project. Instead, she had married him, just as planned. And he never saw Hazel for what she really was and never realized his own feelings for Charina, so he had treated her terribly. For over 20 years of marriage, he never once bought her a gift and never took her on a date. Even their intimacy felt like a routine obligation. It only happened once a month because Charina had requested it on her 35th birthday. Not only that, but in the dream, he had never let go of Hazel, either. He hadn't physically cheated, but he had given her all of his love and attention. And so, for more than 20 years, his marriage to Charina had been nothing but empty shell. Then, when he was 55 years old, his pharmaceutical company faced a major scandal. If he looked into the accident closely, he would see Hazel was actually involved. By then, she was married to a useless, spoiled trust fund brat. In the dream, Harold seethed with jealousy, but he still gave that man plenty of business opportunities just to ensure Hazel lived comfortably. But the man was an absolute disaster. A simple drug manufacturing job turned into a catastrophe, a bacterial contamination that killed countless people. Harold was drowning in damage control. Then, one night, Hazel called him. She told him she was scared of a thunderstorm and couldn't sleep. She even said her husband was away, so she asked if he could come over. And like the pathetic fool he was, Harold dropped everything and drove to her in the middle of a blizzard. But the roads were slick with ice, and he was exhausted from overwork. In the end, he crashed and died at the age of 55. Strangely enough, even though the Harold in the dream had died, his consciousness hadn't completely faded away. He could still see everything that happened after his death. And so, he watched as, after his death, Charina finally unlocked the safe and found the album he had kept hidden away. Every single page was filled with photos of Hazel, from the moment she blossomed into adulthood at 18 years old to her high school graduation and to her college days. Every birthday and every place they had visited together had all been meticulously documented and carefully preserved. In the dream, Charina stared at the photo album for a long time. And then, she understood Harold's feelings for Hazel. And that wasn't all. Before he died, Harold had already written his will. He left everything to Hazel. That part didn't surprise the real Harold. After all, it had been his plan here, too. The moment he had married Charina, he had intended to sign a will transferring all of his wealth to Hazel. He had believed that since he could never give Hazel a promise or happiness in this lifetime, the least he could do was leave all his wealth to her. That was also why he had long made up his mind to have Charina take birth control, ensuring she never carried his child. And in the dream, he had done just that. He had been married to Charina for over 20 years, yet they never had children, in the end, all his inheritance went to Hazel. Charina was left with nothing but his mountain of debt. Since she was his wife, they were all automatically transferred to her. In truth, with her wealth, she could have handled them easily. Her wealth was more than enough to cope it all, after all. But the victims' families didn't know that. All they saw was a widow with nothing. They assumed that without Harold's money, she had no way to repay the damages. And in their blind fury, they stabbed Charina to death. The agony of that moment ripped Harold from the dream. The moment he woke up, Harold found himself momentarily unsure of whether he was the Harold of this world or the one from the dream. His emotions were a tangled mess. Chapter 20. The moment Harold woke up, he was relieved because Charina was still alive in this world. She hadn't been stabbed to death because of him. But a second later, reality crashed down on him. Charina was alive, yes, but she had gone somewhere he could never find her. The pain in his chest was suffocating. In the dream, at least the version of him there had truly had Charina for over 20 years. But in this reality, he had lost her completely. The thought was unbearable. He clutched his head, struggling for air. Seeing him like this, Ella panicked. She grabbed his arm. "What's wrong, Harry? Are you feeling sick? Do you need me to call the doctor?" Harold finally looked up at her with bloodshot eyes. He forced out a hoarse whisper from his throat. "Mom, I really love Charina." The moment he said it, it felt like a weight had been lifted off his chest. He finally admitted it. He finally faced his feelings for Charina. Ella froze for a second at his words, then burst into tears. "I've always known. A mother knows her child best. I could see that you always had a place for Charina in your heart since you were little. I just never understood why you wouldn't admit it. But I knew you loved her. That's why I kept pushing for this marriage. Do you really think I'd force my son to marry a woman he didn't love just because of an old promise to a friend? But you're such a fool. If you love her, why didn't you admit it sooner? Why didn't you treat her better? Why did you have to hurt her so badly, push her away until she gave up on you completely? Why did you only realize your feelings for her now?" Harold sat there, stunned. Why? He had always prided himself on being sharp, always seeing through his business rival's tricks. But when it came to his own feelings, he had been blind. Maybe it was just stubbornness. He had known Charina since they were kids. They practically grew up together. Back then, he had treated her well. If boys bullied her, he would stand in front of her. If she wanted a certain candy, he'd run across several blocks just to buy it for her. So, when did things change? Oh, right, it was the year he started high school, the year Livia died. Ella, who had been close friends with Livia, suddenly announced that she wanted to arrange a marriage between their families. She wanted Charina to be her future daughter-in-law. And back then, Harold had been locked in a brutal argument with his parents over his college choice. They wanted him to study finance and take over the family business, but his real dream was sports. In the end, he caved. He chose a major he didn't care about. But that tiny spark of rebellion never went away. And when his parents forced a fiancé on him, that rebellion exploded. Why? Why did his parents have the right to interfere not only with his college major but also with whom he would marry? Driven by rebellion, he treated Charina worse and worse, as if hurting her was his way of fighting back against them. Then, in his last year of college, he met Hazel. She was the complete opposite of Charina. Charina was smart, while Hazel was naive. Charina was confident and graceful, while Hazel was timid and meek. Charina was a high society heiress, while Hazel had nothing. It was this stark contrast that made Harold care about Hazel even more. The better he treated Hazel, the more it felt like proof that Charina wasn't his type, that his marriage to her had been nothing but his parents' will, forced upon him. He never realized he was trapping himself in a twisted mindset, making the worst choice of his life. Only now did he see Hazel for who she really was. She was never the innocent young lady he thought she was. But even if she had been, he still hadn't truly loved her. His feelings for Hazel had been 3 parts pity, 7 parts rebellion. Charina was the one he had always loved. After all, he had already taken over most of the family business by now. He was already the one in charge. If he had truly never wanted to marry Charina, he could have just ignored his parents' demands. But he had clung to the marriage, pretending it was out of obligation when, deep down, he had always wanted her as his wife. Now that he had finally figured it all out, it was already too late. Beside him, Ella wiped her tears and said through sobs, "It's too late, Harry. Charina's project will keep her away for 10, maybe even 20 years. You two were never meant to be. What's done is done. Everyone gets their heart broken at some point. Just move on and find someone you truly love." Harold's entire body tensed. His head snapped up. "No, I'm not moving on." Chapter 21. Ella froze at Harold's words. When she looked, she saw him clenching his fists tightly, his voice unwavering as he declared, "I will bring Charina back, so long as she's still in this world. I'll bring her home, no matter where she is." In that split second, everything became crystal clear to him. Compared to the dream, where they both met tragic ends after 20 years of a hollow marriage, reality still held a glimmer of hope. So, what if Charina had left? As long as she was alive, he would find her. And he refused to believe she had truly let go. She had loved him for so long. There was no way she could have just walked away like that. It was only because he had treated her so poorly before that he had broken her heart, making her want to escape for now. But now that he had finally acknowledged his true feelings, as long as he pursued Charina sincerely, there was still a chance for them to make things right. Ella was stunned. "What nonsense are you talking about, Harry? Charina is working on a top-secret national project. How could you possibly find her?" But Harold's expression remained calm. "There's always a way. Even if I can't find her, I'll wait for her. 10 years, 20 years, however long it take." "What did you say?" Ella was completely stunned. But, when she saw the unwavering determination on his face, she knew there was no convincing him otherwise. The person before her was no longer the boy they could manipulate at will. He had grown completely. Neither she nor Matthew could control him anymore. Harold wasted no time. The moment he was discharged from the hospital, he started pulling every string he could to find out which project or base Charina was stationed at. But this project was too classified. No matter how much effort he put in, he hit a dead end. So, he switched tactics. Instead of searching directly, he started pouring money into aerospace projects. Most of these projects were government-controlled, but private investors could still get a foot in the door with the right amount of funding and donations. Harold spared no expense. He was laying the groundwork. Sooner or later, he'd find out where Charina was. At the wedding, Matthew and Ella had told everyone that the ceremony would be postponed for a month because Charina was injured. But now, a month had passed, and Charina was still nowhere to be seen. People were starting to ask questions. That was when Matthew and Ella finally admitted the truth: Charina had called off the engagement. The news sent shockwaves through their social circle. Everyone assumed the Santiago family would simply find Harold a new bride. But no one expected what happened next. Harold made a public declaration that he would wait for Charina. He didn't reveal where she had gone. He only said she had gone abroad for further studies and that he would wait for her return. A wealthy heir, once a reckless playboy, was now head over heels for the woman he once dismissed. It was the kind of love story people couldn't get enough of. And with the Moran and Santiago families both being high society elites, plus the fact that both Charina and Harold were exceptionally attractive, they already had a dedicated fanbase. Now, with Harold's dramatic public statement, their story was trending all over the internet. It reached Nebula Aerospace Base as well. "Have you guys seen the news? That rich guy, Harold Santiago, just announced he's waiting for his fiancée to come back from studying abroad." "Yeah, I saw it. But wasn't he totally indifferent to her before? I remember she once booked ad screens all over the city for his birthday. When a reporter asked him about it, he just said it was a waste of money and meant nothing to him." "Oh, yeah, I remember that, too. Now, he's really trying so hard to win her back." So dramatic. By the way, what was his fiancée's name again? I think it was Charina Moran. As the researchers chatted, they slowly turned to look at Charina, who had been quietly eating with her head down. Charina, her name is exactly the same as yours. Even the last name matches. Chapter 22. Charina's hand froze mid-air, fork hovering over her plate. The aerospace base was supposed to be cut off from the outside world. They shouldn't contact anyone beyond these walls to prevent classified information from leaking. But complete isolation was unrealistic. If they had no internet access at all, there would be no way to unwind, and people would lose their minds. So, though researchers weren't allowed to post online, they could still browse the news and even order things online. Any deliveries had to go through a security checkpoint before being distributed. Because of that, Charina had seen all of Harold's public declarations of love online. Her coworkers were now eyeing her with curiosity. Charina, you know, his fiancé left around the same time you got here. Except she went abroad, and you came to this base. Yeah, if no one explained, I'd think you were his fiancé. Laughter rippled through the group. Charina forced a small smile. There are plenty of people in the world with the same name. The researchers here weren't particularly close. Other than Melanie, who had seen her file and knew her background, no one else had a clue that Charina was the heiress of the illustrious Moran family. Not that they'd ever suspect it. In their minds, what kind of rich heiress would walk away from a life of luxury just to bury herself in a grueling research facility? So, when Charina brushed it off, no one doubted her. They simply carried on, gossiping about the latest internet drama. Later that night, as Charina and Melanie were reviewing data, Melanie finally spoke up. Charina, you never talked about it, but I could tell. You came here because your fiancé broke your heart, right? He seems to regret it now. Are you sure you don't want to go back? She hesitated, then added, technically, we can't leave until the project ends, but if you submit a special request, it's not impossible. Charina didn't even pause. I'm not leaving. She lifted her head to look at Melanie and said calmly, maybe he really regrets it, but that doesn't matter. I didn't come here to spite him or hide from him. I came here to chase my dream. Yes, Charina had heard everything Harold had said, but she didn't care. So, what if the Harold of this life realized he loved her now? Even if every word he said this time was sincere, what difference did it make? A love that arrived too late was worth less than dirt. No matter how much he regretted it, nothing could erase what he had done to her in this life, let alone the scars from the last. Charina had no reason to give up anything for a man like that. She had come here to pursue her dream, not for anyone else. In this life, she was going to live for herself. Melanie was stunned by Charina's words. In the end, she gave an awkward nod. You're right, I shouldn't have assumed. I'm sorry. And with that, Charina's life at the base went on as usual. She threw herself into research. As she watched their project advance little by little, she was happier than anyone else. Time flew by. Before she knew it, 3 years had passed. That day, just as Charina was leaving the lab, she ran into one of the senior officials, Benjamin Hall. Charina. He grabbed her arm. There's a donor appreciation banquet tonight. Come with us. Charina frowned. I don't think so. I'm just a researcher. Handling external affairs isn't my responsibility. Benjamin waved a hand dismissively. No need to be modest. We all know you're the Moran family's only heir. You're more familiar with these events than any of us old academics. Just come with us. Charina had no choice but to follow the senior officials to the banquet. The moment she stepped inside and spotted Harold in a suit, she froze. Harold shot to his feet, eyes lighting up with pure joy. Charina. Chapter 23. Charina immediately understood what was happening. She frowned and murmured, Mr. Hall, I should just go back to my research. Turning on her heel, she headed for the exit. But before she could step into the hallway, Harold reached out and grabbed her wrist. Charina, why are you avoiding me? She pulled free and replied calmly, I'm not avoiding you. His voice trembled with emotion as he said, liar. You saw me and tried to leave. If you really didn't care about me, why can't you even face me? Charina let out a weary sigh. Then, meeting his gaze head on, she said evenly, see. I'm not avoiding you. I told you already. I just don't want to waste my time on you anymore. That's all. And that was the truth. She had already wasted her entire lifetime in the last life and her youth in this one. She refused to let even a single second be tangled up with him again. Harold's expression darkened with pain. I'm sorry, Charina, I was wrong. The man who had always carried himself with arrogance now stood before her with his head bowed. His voice was quiet and pleading as he said, "Please, forgive me. I know I treated you terribly before, but I swear I'll spend the rest of my life treating you right. Come back with me, please." Charina only looked at him indifferently. "There's no need to beg me. I already told you. We ended our engagement. That means we're nothing to each other now. There's nothing left to say between us. But I don't want to lose you." Harold grabbed her arm again. "You don't understand. I had a dream after. It felt so real, like a memory from my past life. In that dream, we were married, but I treated you horribly. In the end, I died. And you were stabbed to death because of me. When I woke up, my chest hurt so badly. That's when I finally understood that I love you. I always have. Please, don't leave me again." Harold had only mentioned the dream to explain how he had come to realize his true feelings. But the moment Charina heard his words, her expression shifted. She stared at him for a long time before finally speaking. "What if it wasn't just a dream?" Harold froze. "What do you mean?" She pulled her arm free from his grasp and replied calmly, "It seems there's no point in hiding it from you anymore. Harold, I've gone back in time. That dream of yours wasn't just a dream. It was our past life. Everything I suffered in your dream, the pain and the despair, was all real." Chapter 24. Harold stood frozen. Meanwhile, Charina looked at him as she spoke each word with chilling clarity. "Harold, if you spent over 20 years waiting for someone in your past life, only to be betrayed and killed because of their selfishness, would you give them another chance if you lived again? Would you waste even a minute on them?" Color drained from Harold's face. He stood then, speechless. Charina continued calmly, "The look on your face already tells me your answer. So now, I hope you can understand mine. Don't come looking for me again, Harold." With that, she turned and walked away without a second glance. Harold remained rooted in place, his mind spiraling. That dream had always felt too real. And now, Charina had confirmed that it wasn't just a dream. She had lived through all that suffering. Harold suddenly collapsed to the ground. His eyes were filled with despair. He had thought the dream was a warning, a chance to see his true feelings before it was too late. It had been Charina's reality. And if she had truly gone through all of that, then she would never forgive him. At that thought, Harold covered his face and broke into sobs. Time passed in a blur. 7 years flew by. Charina stood among her fellow researchers, watching as the manned spacecraft touched down successfully. The entire team erupted into cheers. They knew this marked the complete success of their project. The culmination of 10 years of research had finally come to an end. Excitement buzzed through the crowd. "We can finally go home. I wonder if my kid will even recognize me. I wonder if my mom's arthritis has gotten any better over the years." Everyone was talking about their families, eagerly looking forward to the day they could finally go home. Charina, however, remained quiet because she had no home to return to. Her parents were gone, and Harold was nothing but a stranger now. Going back was just another step in her quiet, solitary life. She made her way home without much thought. But when she arrived, she found Ella waiting for her. "Charina, you're finally back." Ella grabbed her hands. Her voice was thick with emotion as she said, "If you had taken any longer, Harry might not have lived to see you one last time." "What?" Charina froze. Chapter 25. Charina followed Ella to the hospital. When she stepped into the ward, she saw Harold lying on the hospital bed, frail and barely hanging on. "What happened?" She frowned. In her past life, Harold had lived past 50 years old and had died in a car accident. Why did his body seem so weak in this life? Ella choked back a sob. "Ever since you left, he has thrown himself into his work like a madman. No one could stop him. His body couldn't take that kind of abuse. He was just diagnosed with late-stage cancer. Health wasn't just about genes. It was about diet, routine, and mental state. And after Charina had walked away, Harold had spiraled. He had stopped caring about his well-being, grinding himself down until his body finally gave out. Charina looked at Harold lying on the hospital bed. He gave her a bitter smile and said, "You actually came back. You know, I once thought that since I let you down for over 20 years in our past life, I'd spend this life waiting for you for another 20. But I never expected that I wouldn't make it. Charina, can you forgive me? Can you give me one last chance?" Charina gazed at the man lying before her, a shadow of who he used to be. She hesitated for a long moment before finally replying, "I forgive you." Harold's eyes dimmed. She had forgiven him, but she hadn't said she would give him another chance. The message was clear. Even now, even as he lay dying, she wouldn't feed him comforting lies. Harold finally closed his eyes in sorrow. Forget it. This was his punishment. In our next life, a real one, with no memories of the past, I swear I'll treat you right. And with that, he took his final breath.